Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, June 10th, 2016 here. For a moment, I didn't think we were going to get a connection to RBN, but we just got in under the wire. So thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. A quick little program reminder, of course, is that the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3 to give us her unique perspective on world events. And she had me load extra paper into the printer, so I think she's got a lot that she wants to bring to the discussion here. All right, getting into the news here. Today is the anniversary of Ben Franklin's flying the kite to prove that lightning was electricity. And as has turned out to be the case with much of history, it is more myth than fact. Had Franklin just stood out there with a kite in his hand and had been struck by lightning, he would have been killed instantly. And by the way, there were a lot of scientists of the day who were proposing that lightning was just static electricity. Now, what Franklin actually did to prove it, he had the kite out there, and it was the string was not being held in his hand. It was tied to a stake inside a shed out of the rain, and they had the line to the kite connected to a Leyden jar, which is a primitive form of capacitor, with the key. We've all heard about the famous key. But the Leyden jar was what collected the static electricity and made the link. And Franklin was standing well away from this, and he saw the strands of fibers on the string repel each other, and that was what actually did happen. And he wrote it up, and it was, of course, proof that the American colonies were now on the world stage of science, and he was made a huge, huge celebrity. And that happened all those years ago on this very day. Now, as you probably heard earlier today, there was a shooting incident at the Dallas Love Field Airport, and it turned out the only ones doing the shooting were the security, the police. And it was actually all caused by a domestic dispute. A man and a woman were having an argument. The man is reported to be the father of the women's children. It's not being said if they're married or not, or if they were divorced, or if this was about child support or whatever. And the man picked up a rock and smashed a car window just in anger. The security showed up and tried to get him to calm down. He picked up a rock and sort of threatened to throw it at the officers, at which point they pulled their guns and fired 9 times, which I think is a bit of an overreaction, but that's what that was all about. And it was just a domestic dispute. It wasn't terrorism. When it first happened, the banner headlines went there, you know, shooting incident, shooter at large, and then it turned out to just be this domestic argument. Getting into the political area, as you know, for the last few days, ever since Hillary declared herself the Democratic nominee, they've been out there saying that she's the first woman ever to be nominated for president. Huzzah, 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 it's history-making. No, it isn't. Sorry to burst your bubble, Hillary, but you're a little late to the gate. Victoria Woodhull was the first woman ever to be nominated for president by an American political party. And yes, it happened before we had the two-party system, but for Hillary to be standing up there saying she's the first woman to be nominated for president is inaccurate. Hillary is either lying again, which she does quite well, or she's ignorant of American history, which is a bad quality in an American president, I would suspect. Remember when Hillary was claiming that she was named after Sir Edmund Hillary, the first man to climb Mount Everest and make it all the way back down safely? Mallory may have beat him, but died on top of the mountain here. Well, Hillary was already 6 years old when Sir Edmund Hillary reached the top of Everest. And in this day and age where now it's a tourist trip and we've gone to the moon and everything, it doesn't seem like a big deal. But in its day, it was as big a news story as the landing on the moon. Man was still reaching out to find the ends of the world, to get to the North Pole, to get to the South Pole, to get to the top of the highest mountain. These were really big deals when it all happened. Now, the other day we were talking about this new group, the Center for a New American Security, which smells suspiciously like the Project for the New American Century with a new coat of paint. And it has many of the same players in it, such as Robert Kagan. And apparently they are now very much a part of Hillary Clinton's campaign. And Leon Panetta is being considered for next Secretary of Defense if Hillary wins. So basically, Hillary is signed on to the neocon agenda, which means a vote for Hillary is a vote for perpetual war. Something you need to think about if you love your children. Now, more and more stories and comments are coming out of California about the funny things going on in their primary, to the point where we're seeing articles like this one in Patriot Rising, that Hillary is not a candidate, she's a usurper. California's primary was stolen, and Hillary's nomination is a coup within the Democratic Party, which means she's going to try the same thing in November. She can't win the election honestly. Look at her disapproval ratings. You look at the polls about Hillary Clinton, and you're wondering, who are these idiots who are voting for her? Well, speaking on behalf of the reputation of the American people, they aren't. There's just a lot of fraud out there, and I'm not the only person to say so. Another article came out of Investment Watch blog. Something doesn't smell right. And basically, they're looking at the numbers of how many voter registrations were created, most of them through that motor voter law Jerry Brown signed into law. And they're looking at the numbers about, you know, the number of people who voted by email versus those who showed up at the polls, and there's a huge disparity because normally early voting by mail is a tiny fraction of the total votes, and in this case it was a huge, huge number, all of which favored Hillary Clinton. Now, somebody also noticed that in the primary, Californians seem to reelect their current government, even though most Californians don't like their government. So what are you out there thinking Hillary's the only politician who rigs elections? Once the elections are riggable, everybody's going to be taking advantage of it, down to the dog catchers. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Guy in Los Angeles, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. How you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Something that Trump should hammer Hillary about. If Hillary was to get the presidency, wouldn't it be just another lie when she swears to uphold the Constitution prior to trying to get rid of the Second Amendment?
Oh, of course it would be another lie. I mean, when Bill Clinton was sworn in as president, Hillary kept referring to that Bible as the prop.
Yeah, that's great. I don't know. I don't see how anybody can get behind this woman.
I don't think anybody is. I think it's all completely manufactured from top to bottom. Massive fraud. Corporate media is helping her. Google is helping her. I mean, she's got access to the billions and billions of dollars out of the Clinton Foundation. Remember, this Wall Street financial expert, who's an expert in forensic accounting, was looking at the books for the Clinton Foundation and saying billions of dollars have gone in there that cannot be accounted for. And I would say one very likely probability is that these billions are coming out of the foundation through various circuitous routes to set up all these PACs to help Hillary, including that $1 million PAC full of online cyber goons that are wrecking websites left and right.
Well, I guess this will all come out when they finally get around to debating each other.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see the debates, but of course it all depends on who's hosting the debate, because we know the corporate media is very much in favor of Hillary. They do not want Donald Trump. Remember that first GOP debate, and they came right on out and attacked Donald Trump on the issue of women?
Yep, yeah. I do. Maybe they should go to an independent broadcast like KTLA or something like that.
That would be a wise thing for Trump to do, but of course Hillary will never allow it because she doesn't want to surrender that home court advantage.
I'll tell you, Michael, it's terrible. Thank you, Michael.
All right, thank you very much for the phone call. Now, there's an organization, TrueVote.org, and like Black Box Voting, they are a group whose agenda is restoring honest, accurate, and fair elections to the United States of America, so that we, the people, truly do choose our own rulers. And they have filed a lawsuit in several parts of the country now, because they're looking at the numbers of what's going on with the votes, and they're seeing clear indications of fraud. And so they're going to go on in there and demand examination of the ballots and records, and there's no reason to refuse. Voting records are supposed to be open records, unless they store them on Lois Lerner's hard drive or something. So there are already lawsuits flying over this, and of course, we understand our government does not want to see any lawsuits. They don't want to see anything that questions the accuracy and fairness of the elections. Because if the American people finally decide the elections are fraudulent, the whole game is over. That belief, that faith that our elections are accurate, honest, and fair is all that's holding this whole fraud together right now. Now, one of the survivors of the Benghazi attack, Chris Paronto, in an interview with Russia Today, is saying it's obvious Hillary Clinton is pushing a false narrative over what happened in terms of the attack itself, who was behind it, the refusal to provide security, and just what was going on with all those guns being smuggled from Libya to Syria through that consulate in Benghazi. Fox News has had a poll showing the majority of Americans believe Clinton is lying about the email server. 60 to 27% margin, they think she's lying. 57 to 32% saying that she endangered U.S. security by using a private email server with weaker security than Ashley Madison. Now, over at the Wall Street Journal, they're running the story about how the emails that are the focus of the Clinton probe are dealing with emails that revealed planned drone strikes. Okay, now this is the beginning of a limited hangout. And if you don't know what I mean by that, I'm going to explain. A limited hangout is a propaganda stunt where you will confess to a minor crime, you'll admit to doing something minor to throw off or blunt inquiries into more serious ones. Now, by going on out and saying, well, the emails were talking about drone strikes in Pakistan, the public reaction is supposed to be, drones? Is that what this email server fuss is all about? Oh, who cares? I'm not interested anymore. That's the purpose of a limited hangout. Now, one very famous case of a limited hangout most of us probably remember is when Ken Starr dangled Monica Lewinsky in that stained blue dress in front of the American people to lure them away from the more serious matters of CIA, cocaine, and gun running to and from Nicaragua, from Arkansas, when Bill Clinton was governor. And, of course, the use of various Arkansas banks, land flip deals, the Arkansas Development Finance Authority as the money laundry for all of this that was going on. And clearly the Wall Street Journal is trying to play the same trick again, saying the email scandal is all about drone strikes. Nothing to see here, nothing whatsoever. Now, they've just come out with a story that Petraeus' mistress laptop had 300 classified documents on it. And I think they're putting it out there so that Hillary's people can say, see, everybody's mishandling classified documents. It's not a problem. Well, Petraeus did lose his job over it. And why did it take this long for the government to admit it? I mean, the timing is very suspicious. It's obviously political. Are we going to have to wait that long to find out just what was on Hillary's email server? She'll be president by then. Justice delayed is justice denied. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Analog Anarchist up in Maine. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. 1,000 apologies. I gave you the wrong title of the musical yesterday.
Okay.
It was Gold Diggers of 1933.
Ah, that one I remember very much so.
The musical is Remember My Forgotten Man. It's sung by Ruby Keeler with a second verse by Etta Moten and a chorus, and it's you've got to see it. Even if you don't like the rest of the movie, it's a strangely political statement in a musical.
Yes. Well, you know, it's kind of interesting. People in Hollywood, they want to make films that make important comments, but they're always being interfered with by, well, back in Busby Berkeley's times, it would have been the Hays Commission and various other censors. And sometimes they have to get really clever about what they're really talking about. You remember the play, later the film, The Crucible, Arthur Miller? And he was writing it about the Salem witch hunts, but what he was really writing about was the McCarthy abuses. But he couldn't actually do that. So he sort of made the comment about what was going on by resetting what was going on in Salem, Massachusetts. The original Star Trek TV show, when Gene Roddenberry had it, was able to deal with very controversial subjects that would have been banned on other TV shows. But by putting them out on alien planets and the other side of the galaxy, the censors said, okay, he's not really talking about us and our society, but Gene Roddenberry always was. And that's really what made the original Star Trek so great and so engaging, was the content of the stories, not the special effects. I mean, if you go back and look at the original Star Trek now, it seems almost laughably primitive. But it was out there provoking the thought of the audience to the point where they were talking right through the commercials about what was going on the show, which is why NBC killed it after 3 years.
Exactly. Science fiction became the last vestige where you could get away with any political writing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And, yeah, that Gold Diggers, that's an iconic example of Busby Berkeley's work. And I realize I'm talking to people who are at least my age and older, and the younger people have no idea what I'm talking about. But you can go out and Google it. Now, apparently, in a recent, well, not really a press gathering, because Hillary isn't doing those, but Judy Woodruff got a chance to ask Hillary about the allegations of corruption in the Clinton Foundation, and Hillary just stonewalled and refused to answer. It's very obvious there's something going on. And apparently another little scandal coming out of ABC News is that a large Clinton Foundation donor was placed on a highly sensitive nuclear intelligence board. And what made this kind of weird is this guy has no experience with intelligence or nuclear technology. He's a high-frequency stock trader. He's a Wall Street scammer. And he donated a lot of money to the Clinton Foundation, and he gets this job on this highly sensitive nuclear intelligence board. And other members of the board were asking, what the heck is this guy doing here? And the Clintons basically just bludgeoned them back into silence. So, anyway, as I mentioned before, we're seeing all these stories. This one's in Washington Times. Google accused of manipulating searches to bury negative stories about Hillary Clinton. It's not quite the image of Google we got out of that movie, The Interns, which is a fun movie. I enjoy it greatly. Now, early today, there was a report that came out confirming that in their meeting, Barack Obama and Bernie Sanders were talking about Sanders as being Hillary's vice presidential running mate in exchange for Bernie stepping down and stopping his opposition to Hillary. And the sources saying that Bernie Sanders turned Obama down, said, no, I don't. And he's smart to do so. John Adams called the vice presidency the most boring job in government. And Sanders just wants to be his own person. And today we're seeing Elizabeth Warren coming on out and endorsing Hillary Clinton. Now, she has been neutral all this time, and all of a sudden she's no longer neutral. She's endorsing Hillary Clinton. And apparently, according to Fox News, Hillary Clinton and Elizabeth Warren are now in a meeting fueling speculation that the Democrats are going to mount an all-estrogen slate for November. And I want to point something out here, because Hillary is still trying to play the woman card. In 2008, the PC people insisted we elect a black president solely because he was black, and we got a huge surge in the national debt, massive unemployment, NSA spying, more wars, and Obamacare. And now those same PC people are insisting we elect a woman president solely because she's a woman. Personally, I think it's time for the American voter to raise their standards a little bit and look at the character of the person, not the gender, not the plumbing. By the way, Elizabeth Warren has been quoted as saying, if the Republicans disarm, all is well and good. If they refuse to disarm, we shall disarm them ourselves. So Elizabeth Warren is a rock-solid gun grabber. That's what she wants to do. Now, there's an interesting article. I'm going to have to tease it in because we're coming into a commercial break here. And it came out of 21st Century Wire. And it's basically saying instead of deciding who's better for the White House, we should be looking at who would be worse. We'll talk about that when we come back from this commercial break. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. So we're looking at this article that came out of 21st Century Wire. Instead of thinking who might be best for the White House, we really ought to be looking who's going to be worse. And that makes the choice very, very easy. On one hand, you've got Hillary Clinton with all kinds of scandals, CIA cocaine drug running into Arkansas during the Iran-Contra affair, Whitewater, Flowerwood, Castle Grand, the cattle futures trades. Hillary Care, Chinagate, IRS Gate, the murder of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster, Benghazi, the email server, and on the other hand, you've got Donald Trump, who so far his only crime is he made the illegal immigrants feel bad. He wounded their feelings. Oh, evil little Donald Trump here. He wants to build a wall, which is what Hillary was saying we should do back in 2006. And by the way, for those of you who love the taste of irony, the Democratic National Committee has announced they're going to build a wall around the Democratic Convention. Our walls are good. Israel's walls are good. Donald Trump's walls are bad. We're going to go to the phone here. Randy in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, yeah, I did not expect Bernie to take himself out of the VP spot. But this figures under them wanting to get Warren in there. I guess Bernie's not going to play ball with them.
Well, I mean, you know, Trump is already out there telling the Bernie Sanders voters, you know, you got cheated. He's making a play for them, and he's going to get a lot of them.
Yep. And that really upsets me quite a bit. Excuse me for a second while I cry into my hanky. All right. Over it. Yeah. I think that if we get a whole bunch of Bernie supporters voting for Donald, it's going to be hard as hell for Hillary to steal the election.
Oh, but rest assured, she will try. You know, she.
Oh, I know that.
You know, I'm you know, if she gets the White House, I'm expecting her to stand up there at the inauguration speech and say, you know, thank you, Diebold, I couldn't have done this without you.
Yep. And as far as Elizabeth Warren goes, you know, I think that she probably would have done better if she had picked Bernie, but that makes too much sense. So, of course, Hillary really hasn't had a good record of using common sense.
Well, you know, they're all thinking in terms of what is their best advantage. And I know there's a lot of people, I get emails from Bernie Sanders supporters saying, you've got to support him, stop supporting Trump, support Bernie Sanders. I'm sorry, for all intents and purposes, Sanders is out of the run for the presidency, barring Hillary's arrest and indictment at this point. So, you know, again, my philosophy is anybody, anything, then Hillary. And, you know, I put up a poster the other day, you know, with Hillary Clinton and Satan, and it said, stop voting for the lesser of two evils and vote for Hillary Clinton.
Ooh, that's a slam.
Okay, anything else?
That'll do it.
All right, well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to go to John in Barbados. And, John, we're coming up on a commercial break. I'm probably going to have to take you through it. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. I'm looking at the news. This is the mainstream news. I exclude all the current audience and listeners to this program, but America is the most misinformed, ill-informed, propagandized nation on the planet, second only to Israel and Great Britain.
I'm not even sure that I think our country's in first place. I think we're the most lied to people on the face of the earth. And yes, there's a lot of propaganda by governments against their people in all nations, but it has been raised to an art form here in the United States of America. The issue is the corporate media, and we don't call them mainstream anymore because the mainstream has now come on over here. We're now the new mainstream, and that's the problem they're dealing with. We have a larger audience share than the corporate media. They're never going to admit it. They're going to go on pretending that they have the lion's share of the viewers, but their ad revenues are in decline and the writing is more or less on the wall. Most of them are losing money hand over fist, and they're being propped up only to continue serving as the Ministry of Propaganda. John, we're going to put you on hold, and we're going to be right back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're talking to John in Barbados. And, John, I think looking at the corporate media is not really going to give you an accurate picture of what's going on with the American people, because the corporate media is putting out the lies, and then in order to keep the financial support that allows them to operate very deeply in the red, they're going to go on saying, we've convinced them. Everybody believes what we are telling them, and that simply may not be true.
Well, I want to just make another comment now about this pivot to Afghanistan, this number of targets, and here was me thinking that they'd already bombed all the hospitals, children's homes and schools.
Well, gosh darn it, those Afghanis rebuilt those. So we have to go in and bomb all those hospitals and schools again until they understand just how this war is being played.
Well, I think we have to remind people that there's still funerals and weddings to bomb. And, of course, when the rescuers turn up, we can bomb those too, can't we?
Yeah.
What are the freaks in the Pentagon like?
It's a terror campaign, is what it is. I mean, the United States government is using those drones exactly the same way that Adolf Hitler used the V-1 buzz bomb and the V-2 ballistic missile against London. They weren't very accurate devices. But from Hitler's point of view, yes, they would have loved to have hit important targets. But the real purpose of those weapons was to, first of all, show that Germany could attack Great Britain from that great a distance, and to terrorize the British people into forcing their government to capitulate to Nazi Germany's demands. And, of course, it backfired horribly. These attacks just hardened British resolve to stand with their government against the foreign invader, and we're seeing exactly the same thing in all these countries the U.S. is sending the drones into.
Well, I'm looking at what's happening now in Syria, and it looks like the serious race is on to Raqqa.
Yes.
With the Syrian Arab army are making huge strides, and it looks like they're going to get there first, and that will destroy the idea that Syria can be broken into separate regions. I think if they get control of Raqqa and Raqqa province, that'll be the end of the breakup of Syria.
I think so, and apparently the offensive to retake Aleppo has stumbled badly. That's not working. And Syria is going to, take back all of Syria, and they're going to kill all the terrorists, U.S.-sponsored or otherwise. And at that point, the U.S. is not going to have any real justification to continue inserting troops into Syria without the permission of the Syrian government.
Well, coming out of the Syrian News Network, the SNN, according to their, I don't know whether it's propaganda or reality, but they've cut off the main road which leads from Aleppo into Turkey, and it's now under the control of the Syrian Arab Army and its allies.
That's game, set, and match right there.
Yeah, so it means that whatever is in Aleppo already is the only thing that's going to get there unless America starts dropping arms and ammunition and food and stuff to the rebels.
And I'm sure the Russian surveillance aircraft, reconnaissance aircraft are going to get wonderful little videos of the United States dropping arms and weapons into these terrorist groups that we're all supposed to hate and fear, and yet we find out our government has been giving them all kinds of guns, guns that we're not allowed to have. But our government will spend our tax money to give these guns to the ISIS and Al-Qaeda, not to mention the Mexican drug cartels.
My final comment is, it's from a famous duo. Another fine mess you've got us into, yes. Aldi.
Absolutely. And again, I think the problem is we all basically are encouraged to assume, and we know what assume means, that anybody who's inside the government of Washington, D.C. is somehow automatically superior, better educated, smarter. Halberstam had the book The Best and the Brightest about just how badly the people in Nixon's administration botched up everything. Remember when during the whole Watergate situation where Deep Throat, was out there saying, the truth is these guys aren't very smart. They're just ruthless and willing to do whatever it takes to get into power. But the quality of thinking that's been coming out of Washington, D.C. for the last quarter of a century is actually very poor. And part of it's being a product of the media age where everybody's thinking in 30 and 60-second sound bites and careful, well-thought-out analysis. If it's being done, it's being ignored. And somebody gets an idea into their head and, yes, that'll be good, we're going to run with it. And then it blows up in their face, and they scapegoat some underling to take the fall for it, and then they go right back on to doing the same thing again. But,
I think the media in America now is operating under the get smart principle. would you believe? And then they changed the story again. Would you believe?
Yeah, we had another caller into the show who was doing that, and I've commented on. I've commented. Okay, I've commented on it many times. And, on Get Smart, it was funny. When you're seeing the corporate media really trying to play that game with you, would you believe it was only about drones from the Wall Street Journal? And it is, but, confidence in the corporate media is definitely down there in the Al-Qaeda. And you shouldn't judge what Americans are really thinking and feeling based on the presentations coming out of the corporate media. I mean, right now, Congress is looking at a new bill that would literally create a U.S. government Department of Propaganda to stick on the American people.
Well, in Britain now, the Brexit vote looks like it's got at least a 10-point lead. They're having to admit that. I know it's a lot bigger than that.
Yes.
But look at what's happened to the markets today, because they've announced that the Brexit is now leading by quite a considerable percentage points.
Yes.
Over the Remain.
Well, the Brexit, I mean, I'm looking at the stock market, and unusual for a Friday, they did not have their happy ending, because we know that the market riggers always like to massage the markets on Fridays to have a happy ending at the close, so that all of those money junkies can have a mild, relaxing weekend and think everything is still hunky-dory. But you're absolutely right. If Great Britain succeeds in breaking free of the European Union, and it may even take a revolt of the British people against the Parliament to do it, you're going to start seeing the whole EU start to come apart. And this is going to be a major, major setback, a crippling setback for the New World Order, one world government people.
I think it will be, and it will also be a major setback for the banking system, because I think, the economy collapsing in this way will also cause considerable pressure on the central banking system and bring that down with it, I think.
Well, good, because that central banking system, that private central banking system has to go, because all of the evils we are suffering as the human race come out of this money junkie scam that they have been playing on planet Earth for the last 300 years. And we need to establish, carved in stone, a new principle for whatever future government's going to be here in this country. The public currency is a public utility, and it will be handled as such.
Yeah, no more central banks, no more central banks, no more central banks.
Absolutely. And we'll work out the rest of the details after the collapse and the restoration, okay? Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Now, apparently, Paul Craig Roberts was being interviewed over on Pravda, and he was asked, what should we expect from Hillary Clinton in the White House? And Paul Craig Roberts' answer was, war. And he's absolutely right. A vote for Hillary Clinton is a vote for war. War which ultimately I think the United States is going to lose, even if it does go nuclear. Now, interestingly enough, military people seem to be aware of this, because there was a survey in Military Times of American military personnel, active duty service members who are involved in all these wars, and what they found out is Donald Trump is leading Hillary Clinton by more than 2-1. These are professional military people. They understand what the war is and what it's doing better than the average American, and they have had enough. Donald Trump is out there on record saying he wants to go back to being friends with Russia. He wants to go back to being friends with China. He wants to do business with them. He wants to do trade, peace through commerce. Why is that such a threat to the established U.S. order? Well, for two reasons. Wall Street got lazy on the Bretton Woods deal. They've allowed our manufacturing to decline in quantity and quality, and nobody wants our GMO agriculture. And without that mafia-like piece of the action of everybody else's global commerce, by forcing them to use the U.S. dollar, the American economic system is going to implode. That's it. That's what these wars are all about. Risking the incineration of the surface of planet Earth in this argument over whose brand of ink and paper will be used for global trade and banking. Now, Donald Trump has already come out talking about his first day in office. I always love an optimist. And basically says he's going to start rescinding all kinds of executive orders, in particular those of Barack Obama, with special focus on immigration, border control, and the Second Amendment. All right. Now, Mitt Romney, although not being considered as a replacement for Donald Trump is still the hub of the anti-Trump Republicans. And he's holding a summit, pulling together all of these GOP leaders who are now finding themselves a party in exile. Because the GOP, for all intents and purposes, is now the party of Donald Trump. And they're scratching their head and figuring out what's going on with all of that nonsense. How is Donald Trump so popular? And what's going on here? And I think it was Mitch McConnell came on out saying that it's time for Donald Trump to get in line with the establishment political system. In other words, you've got to be just like us or we're not going to let you in. Well, it may not be up to Mitch McConnell anymore. And here's what's going on, and it really is very simple to understand, which is why the people in Washington, D.C. are never going to get this. When the people get screwed over time and time again by the establishment politicians, they're not going to remain entirely cheerful about it. Now, if Washington, D.C. had been doing a good job of taking care of this nation and the American people, Donald Trump's campaign would be little more than a footnote. But the tsunami of corruption and looting and war and illegal immigration and refugees and forced vaccination, surveillance, Obamacare has all taken its toll. People are supporting Donald Trump, first and foremost, because he does not represent more of the same that we've lived under for the last quarter of a century. That's it. We want a change, and the only candidate out there talking about change is Donald Trump. Hillary's already out there. She's on board with the neocons. Yes, we have to conquer the world and make the world love us. Sheriff Clark is out there saying, where is Loretta Lynch? These anti-Trump riots, which we know are bought and paid for. We keep finding those Craigslist ads. These troublemakers are being paid $15 an hour. Some are getting room, board, and travel expenses to go on in and disrupt Trump's rallies, the way the brown shirts did in Germany. These are hate crimes and violations of America's civil rights. These people should be prosecuted. Now, the good news is some of them have gone overboard, and they've committed assaults, and they've been arrested for felony assault. And at some point, one of them is going to make a plea deal saying, reduce my sentence and I'll tell you who we were working for, which will never, ever be covered in the corporate media. Meanwhile, I think Hillary is feeling the ground shrink underneath her feet. Because now she's out there, she's demanding that Donald Trump delete his Twitter account. Her feelings are hurt by Donald's Twitter comments about her and her friends and immigration. You're hurting our feelings. That's why you can't be president. Donald Trump posted back saying, how long did it take Hillary Clinton to delete those 30,000 emails from her server? Beautiful, Barb. Beautiful response. Hillary walked into that one with both feet, stepped into a big old bear trap there. Now, there is a bit of good news coming on out. Several Senate Democrats have joined together yesterday to announce the 2016 We the People Act. And some of the things it's going to do. First of all, donors who contribute more than $10,000 during an election cycle must be publicly identified. It also includes a provision to ban former members of Congress from working as lobbyists. In other words, it's reversing much of the damage caused by the Citizens United Supreme Court decision. We have to return control of this nation to the people, or there's going to be a revolution. And I would really like to not see that happen. But it does seem that it's getting closer. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I haven't talked to you in a while. I want to talk about Elizabeth Warren. Well, for somebody who is supposed to be anti-Wall Street, why is she, endorsing Hillary Clinton at this point, unless she has her own ambitions?
Oh, that's exactly what it is. I mean, we're starting to hear all this word about Warren is being considered as Hillary's vice presidential running mate. So, of course, Warren is going to come on out and endorse Hillary Clinton and make all the nice, appropriate noises. because this means that following Hillary's term in office, Warren sees a possibility for herself to run for president.
And I want to skip over to Russia, where that report came out from somebody from NATO said they can overrun NATO in 60 hours. It would probably be about a little less or a little more. I mean, because the Russians will use, tactical nukes if a massive.
I disagree. I disagree. Primarily for the hard lessons learned by those U.S. nuclear tests, where they set off a tactical nuke in the Nevada desert and marched an army into it to exploit the breach in the enemy's lines, and all those soldiers, of course, came down with cancer and leukemia. Plus, I think Putin would be ill-advised to be the first user of nuclear weapons. In any event, he almost doesn't need to. The United States has been at war in all of these, dozen or more countries since 2003. And our stockpiles are drawn down, our existing weapons are worn out, and the replacements being built are hideously expensive pieces of junk like the F-35, the Independence-class littoral combat ships, the Freedom-class littoral combat ships. The F-22 is still asphyxiating its pilots, and on and on and on and on. Meanwhile, Russia and China, who have a much more cost-effective weapons procurement system, have been modernizing and upgrading their weapons, and especially in the area of electronic warfare, Russia is just absolutely unbeatable at this point. We saw that with the USS Donald Cook. Absolutely paralyzed it. Anyway, we've got to take a break for commercials. Thank you very much for the phone call, Dustin. We're going to let you go, and we will be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I forgot to do the shout-out to our on-air affiliates there at the top of the hour. So we know you're there. We appreciate your listening to our program here, and I will be better about it to do the little reminder here. There's too many buttons in this little radio studio here. All right, turning to the war zones. As of last report, the Syrian army is just 20 kilometers from Tabqa Air Base. This is a key facility. If they retake it, Russia will be able to deploy out of it. And that will be dynamically improving the situation for the people of Syria to retake their country from these ISIS and Al-Qaeda and all these other groups being sponsored by the United States of America. I mean, let's put this in a different context. How would you feel if you found out Canada was sending money to, some group causing trouble in the United States of America, like Black Lives Matter, with the ultimate goal of overthrowing the government and putting a Canadian-compliant ruler in Washington, D.C.? How would you feel about that? How do you feel about the fact that Israel's already bought and sold our entire federal government? It's not something people are going to be comfortable with. And that's certainly true in Syria and Afghanistan and Iraq and everywhere else the U.S. has been playing this game here. Now, the U.S. has announced they're going to be increasing airstrikes up in Afghanistan because the Taliban is refusing to roll over and fall down dead. And here's the P.S. you have to pay attention to. Okay, this new plan for increased airstrikes will affect the timeline of withdrawal for the 9,800 U.S. troops stationed there. Remember back in 2008, candidate Barack Obama said when he gets to the White House, the first thing he's going to do is end the wars and bring our kids home. And here we are basically just months away from the end of his term in office, and the troops are there with no end of the conflict in sight. Of course, Obama also promised he was going to mandate GMO labeling. And there's another reminder there. You can't take anything a candidate says who's come out of that political establishment. That's true of Barack Obama. It was true of George W. Bush, and it's certainly true of Hillary Rodham Clinton. How do you know a politician's lying? Their lips move and words come out. Now, Paul Craig Roberts is out there with another editorial. What is pushing the U.S. towards war with Russia? And he starts out the article castigating the corporate media, saying the U.S. doesn't really have a media. Yes, they do, Paul. It's here in the independent media. And you've been on my show. You should know this by now. But he's basically talking about the corporate media acting as the Ministry of Propaganda. And now the U.S. Congress is looking at a law to literally make it official that the U.S. government will have a Ministry of Propaganda whose job it is to lie to you. to get you to go along with whatever the government wants, invading Iran, invading Russia, invading China, human-caused global warming, GMOs are good for you, vaccines are wonderful, and you'll have 800 of them before you reach age 18. All right, we're going to take a break for our top of the hour station identification. We'll be back with hour number 2 after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. I see we have a caller waiting right now. Before I get to it, though, I mean, have you noticed on the corporate media, it has been non-stop coverage of the funeral of Muhammad Ali. And I have to wonder, what is going on that they don't want to report to us? And I know Muhammad Ali was very popular in certain segments of our society. But this is a little overblown. You know, John F. Kennedy's funeral didn't get this kind of saturation coverage, as I recall. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Fran in Washington State. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Listen to your show every day. Glad to hear that you are now pulling in more readers and listeners than corporate media. Now, one of the things, you know, you talk about Obama not being able to fulfill his promises. Michael, you are leaving out the painfully obvious that those of us, including you, know that our government is nothing but puppets.
Yes.
And it's the money masters, the puppet masters that run the world.
Well, you know what's really interesting? You know, 100 years ago, a corrupted Congress and a corrupted president sold the American people into the slavery of the private central bankers, not realizing they were also selling themselves at the same time.
And there you have it.
Yes.
You know, and so when you narrow it down to talking about a person's failure to do his promises, the thing of it is, I don't think anybody knows until they take that oath of office what's really going on, and the fact that they are just puppets of what's really going on.
Well, that's why
nobody wants them to know that.
That's why there is such a huge support for Donald Trump, because he's not a career establishment politician. He's coming out of the world of business, where you keep your promises or you don't stay in business. He's a plain talker. He's saying what most Americans are thinking and feeling. He's not politically correct. He is this huge threat to the current established order. And the puppet masters want to protect their puppets by keeping Donald Trump out of the White House, because Donald Trump is coming in there with a big pair of scissors aimed at those strings. Okay?
Yeah. Well, thanks for the call, Mike. And hopefully we can crack open awareness beyond the politics, because it definitely is beyond the politics, and you're absolutely right. It's been going on for 300 years or more. And I'm a Bernie person. And I tell you, I've never voted Republican in my life, but if something not good happens to Bernie, I'm going to go rogue.
I'm hearing that from a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters. They're very angry at all the fraud. They're very angry at the very obvious institutional bias of the Democratic National Committee, especially Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And I'm hearing that from a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters, that they're going to vote for Trump. And that's a real big problem for Hillary Clinton. I think that's why Obama tried to talk Bernie into being her VP, to keep those votes in the Democratic column. And Bernie Sanders turned them down. And that's a big, big, big problem, because past a certain point, if Trump gets a landslide vote, all the vote fraud in the world is not going to be able to reverse that without making it obvious to everybody that's what happened, and that's when the revolution will start.
Okay, Mike, thanks for taking my call.
Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Now, yesterday, as you know, there was a shooting in Tel Aviv, and, Israel's already out there saying, oh, the evil Palestinians, we must avenge ourselves. We're going to bomb the heck out of Gaza. And they canceled all the Ramadan visiting permits, and basically the usual pattern of collective punishment on what may be, again, another Israeli false flag. Because anytime Israel's going to uncork on Gaza, they'll gin up some kind of a violent episode, supposedly involving one or two Palestinians, as an excuse to go on out and commit war crimes against Gaza and the West Bank. But apparently, there is now a big fracture in Israel's political consciousness. The mayor of Tel Aviv is out there saying, hold on a minute. The reason for this attack, and all these attacks, is because of this continuing occupation of Palestine by Israel. This is the mayor of Tel Aviv saying this. And he's not alone. There was actually an article in Haaretz saying that the only solution to Palestinian terrorism is the end of the occupation. Even Haaretz is saying this has gone on too long. Now, Israel's new ultra-right-wing government is out there trying to gin up a reason to just go on into Gaza and the West Bank and scrub it all out and declare it to be part of the new Eretz Israel. But very clearly, they do not have the support of their own media, their own lower politicians, and certainly not the Israeli people who are just sick and tired of it all. Now, one of the interesting aspects of this is that apparently the terrorists, whoever they were, used I guess for lack of a better word, a homemade machine gun called the Carlo. And it's based on another, this is the moment when we take a second to welcome our on-air affiliates back into the fold of the What Really Happened radio show here on Republic Broadcasting Network, and we're all glad to have you here. We're talking about the shooting in Tel Aviv yesterday and how the mayor of Tel Aviv and Haaretz have already gone public saying, look, the only way to stop these attacks, it's time to end that occupation. It's gone on for way, way too long. Occupation is not supposed to be a permanent state of being. And apparently the guns used in this attack yesterday are called the Carlo. It's a handmade copy of another weapon. But it can be made at home or in a simple workshop. And it's described as cheap and more than powerful enough to cause mayhem and death. It's not accurate. I mean, I saw pictures of this thing. It's not well made. It's not a finished weapon. But it does the job. But here's the key point. They're describing this Carlo machine gun as nearly impossible to prevent its production. Even if they confiscate and grab the Carlos, people just go on out and they build another one in their garage. And it's another reminder that gun bans only disarm the law-abiding citizens. If you really think about it. Guns are actually easy to make. When I was a kid, making black powder firearms was one of my hobbies. And if you're living in a totally disarmed society, even a 6-shot black powder Civil War revolver is very effective in committing crimes if you want to. Anybody with a basic knowledge of chemistry and machining can make a gun. We've had all of these what are called the Ghost 80, the Ghost 80, the ARs, the 80% complete lower receivers. Those are big sellers. People are buying those things. I mean, regular gun sales are going through the roof, too. But it doesn't take much to set up a factory to produce these weapons. And a good example of that happened in Arkansas under Governor Bill Clinton. And there's a book about it, Compromised Clinton, Bush, and the CIA, by Terry Reid, who was one of the people involved in this Iran-Contra cocaine and gun running operation that was going down to Nicaragua and coming back to Arkansas. They literally set up a factory producing lower receivers without serial numbers, around which they assembled M16s to send down there. It's not that hard to make a gun. It really isn't. Not at all. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Frank in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Okay, Mike, thank you for taking my call. I'm just weighing in on the Elizabeth Warren's endorsement of Hillary Clinton. I mean, the Democratic Party has become such a disappointment.
So has the GOP, let's be fair.
Well, she could have got something out of it. I wish, if she was truly fighting for the people, she could have said, okay, you want my endorsement? Fine, but you got to release your transcripts of the speeches you gave to Wall Street.
No. Warren is being considered as Hillary's vice president, and she's going to be a good little girl to get that number 2 job, in the hope that Hillary's medical problems will put her in the center seat somewhere in the next 8 years.
Well, I just think that the people should have got something out of it. I think the Wall Street speeches are probably one of the most primary reasons why Bernie Sanders continues to fight.
Frank,
yes.
Let me talk for a second here. You are so charmingly naive. Look at the way the primaries have been handled all year long. What the people want is absolutely the lowest priority in all of these individuals' mind. Okay? Elizabeth Warren will mouth, I'm working for the people, to get the people to vote for her, but we can tell from her actions she's out for herself, just like Carly Fiorina was, just like Hillary Clinton is.
Well, it just goes to show the games go on, Mike, but I am registering a protest vote, and I am voting for Trump. I can honestly tell you that, because the Democratic Party, I think Sanders had a fairly good movement, and he was cheated also, I think, at a lot of delegates.
Yes, he was.
I didn't understand the superdelegate process.
It wasn't just the superdelegates. I mean, when the state conventions were getting together, they were just arbitrarily handing more delegates to Hillary, out of line with the actual primary vote results in their states. I mean, they gave the nomination to Hillary Clinton. That other article we talked about earlier is accurate. She's not a candidate. She's a usurper.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, Mike, it seems like the big boys at the top, or the big ones that run, they just can't understand our outrage. They can't see how we're being basically rigged out of elections and cheated out of elections, and our voice are being, basically suppressed. I just don't understand that any reasonable, rational person would have said, there is outrage, it is justified, and these people do have legitimate complaints. Why don't you just listen to the people? And they just throw us away.
These are not reasonable, rational people. These are people caught in the grips of money addiction. And if you've ever had an experience to see somebody who's addicted to heroin or cocaine or methamphetamines or even just alcohol, when they're in the throes of their addiction, they are oblivious to everything else around them. On top of which, that people in high positions tend towards sociopathy. And sociopaths absolutely do not feel empathy for anybody else around them. They cannot feel, they don't care about the pain they cause to others. All they think about is me first, me, mine, I want. Whatever I want, and anybody who gets in my way, we're just going to dump them in Fort Marcy Park.
Excellent, Mike. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Mike, for letting me vent. I was really disappointed. And Elizabeth Warren, I thought she was more upstanding, but now we know she's just another player in the vast big boy players.
Okay.
It's such a shame.
Well,
thank you so much,
Frank,
Michael.
I can deal with your disappointment here. Just get it over with once and all. Every single established politician is out for themselves, and they will lie, cheat, and steal to get what they want. They lie from the moment they get out of bed to the moment they drink that last gulp of whiskey and fall back into bed. They never tell the truth about anything out of fear we might learn how to tell the difference. That's why we need non-politicians running this country. And that's the way the country was originally started up. That first government of the United States of America were people who had jobs. George Washington had a plantation, so did Thomas Jefferson. They were farmers. They sold crops. They brewed beer. They distilled whiskey. Ben Franklin was a publisher. Paul Revere was a silversmith. These were people for whom being in the government was a part-time honorarium. This country was never intended to have a permanent full-time ruling class. And yet we've wound up with one. Anyway, Frank, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Now, over in New York, apparently Cuomo's passing or declaring that New York was going to start dumping investments in companies that were supporting the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement has triggered a backlash. New Yorkers are protesting against him. First of all, because we all understand and recognize the injustice being committed by Israel against Palestine. We all recognize that a boycott is protected under freedom of speech. It is a peaceful form of protest that is protected by the Constitution. And Cuomo is clearly in defiance of the Bill of Rights. Israel hates the Bill of Rights. They want that to go away in this country. And finally, of course, I think there's a message going from New Yorkers to Cuomo saying, look down. What country are you standing on? What state are you standing on? Isn't that supposed to be your job? If you're all that worried about what's going on in Israel, resign, move to Tel Aviv, and run for the Knesset. But we have had it. with American politicians, theoretically voted into office by Americans, living off American tax dollars who are just obsessed with what's going on in Israel while our country is rotting on the vine. Enough is enough is enough. Now, turning to the economic news, the House of Representatives has just passed a Puerto Rico rescue bill. Puerto Rico is $70 billion in debt, stuck in a recession. The bill is being hailed as a bipartisan compromise. President Obama and Hillary Clinton both support it, as does Republican House Speaker Paul Ryan. They, of course, are not paying for this. You are. We're going to just take more of America's tax money that should be going to fix our roads and schools and hospitals and take care of the American people, and we're going to send it to Puerto Rico, where it'll immediately do a 180-degree turn and fly right back out into the pockets of the bankers. That's what's going on here. Now, Gawker Media has been forced to file for bankruptcy, and this is a result of a court decision that awarded $140 million to professional wrestler Hulk Hogan. Apparently, they said something about him he did not like. I'm a little surprised because I actually got to meet Hulk Hogan many years ago when he was hanging out with Cyndi Lauper. And, you know, off the wrestling ring, he struck me as a pretty nice, decent guy, okay? But there's more to the story. Gawker is still continuing operation. They want all of the monies to be put in an escrow account pending their appeal of the decision. But here's where it gets interesting. When the lawsuit was filed by the lawyers on behalf of Hulk Hogan, it turned out the lawyers were being paid by Silicon Valley billionaire Peter Thiel. He was financing the effort, and he may have financed other lawsuits against Gawker. And what we're seeing here is lawfare. Because if they can wreck Gawker and its value, then it can be bought for pennies on the dollar. And so what we're seeing here is a clandestine hostile takeover masquerading as a defamation lawsuit. That desire for stacks of those pieces of ink and paper has really destroyed all ethics and morality in our society. And that's a terrible thing, that lust for money is indeed the root of all evil. And I'm not saying that I would be immune to those kind of effects. I've never had the opportunity to find out, but I welcome it. By the way, the Obama phone program, remember that one? Another one of Obama's wonderful, we're going to make the world better. Apparently, fraud in the Obama phone program is costing American taxpayers $500 million every year. By the way, we just put up an article at WhatReallyHappened.com, and it's basically this writer is commenting on Saul Alinsky, who was an inspiration to Hillary Clinton. Barack Obama mentions him in his book. And Saul literally wrote out 8 steps to bringing socialism to the United States of America, and Obama and Hillary are implementing all 8 of them. Unfortunately, what they're bringing to America is not pure socialism. They want all the lower classes to be socialistic, but they want the upper classes to be fascistic. That's what they meant by that third way they were talking about years and years and years ago. Over in Great Britain, we're coming up on the Brexit vote, and the polls are showing a hard shift toward the Leave campaign. The fear-mongering is going on, and apparently there's been a huge embarrassment reported over in the Daily Mail. This unelected government minister has gone out there telling the British voters how dare they overrule the members of Parliament by backing the Brexit. You're not supposed to decide what happens to this country. Parliament will decide. You've got nothing to say about it. Well, like I said before, the last British ruler with that kind of arrogance was Charles I, and it really didn't work out all that well for Chucky, as it were. France is actually saying Britain should be punished if they Brexit. And I can already see the French trying to invade England, can't you? We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, interestingly enough, over in Great Britain, the Daily Telegraph was running an analysis of Brexit voters, especially in light of this extension of the deadline for people to register to vote in the EU referendum. And what they discovered is that people who are in the demographics expected to vote to remain were the ones who were late getting to the registration. The Brexit voters were mobilized. They were all registered early on. And so with this little device of claiming the registration website crashed and then adding another 2 days on there, allowed more potential Remain voters to register. It definitely biased it. They're estimating an additional 30,000 more Remain voters were able to register because of the extension of the deadline. I mean, they're not even trying to hide the cheating anymore. It's what's going on here. Now, getting on back to the war zones, story just now breaking out of TASS. Apparently, Russian diplomats are now showing evidence that the so-called terrorist forces near Aleppo, trying to mount that offensive, are under the command of Turkish military advisors. Meaning what we're seeing, this march on Aleppo, is a Turkish military invasion. Remember in Vietnam, when the Americans went over there, oh, we're only advisors. But everybody understood this was a U.S. war. And they think that's going to work on us again. So this could be the spark that really kicks off things. Okay, did we talk to Mark in North Carolina yet? Mark, are you there?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Okay, yeah.
I'm right here.
Okay, what's on your mind?
Yeah, well, first of all, we talked about Elizabeth Warren before. I looked up her net worth. This woman has made herself into a multimillionaire. She cheated on a job saying that she was an American Indian, which she's not, and that got her a $430,000 professor job at Harvard, with affirmative action. And this woman is, it doesn't surprise me about her being a hypocrite. At least Bernie Sanders, I looked up his net wealth, his net worth. Not all that much. So this guy is basically seems to be who he says he is. She's not. So it doesn't surprise me her coming out to support. As a matter of fact, I expected it, supporting Hillary.
There had been talk about it earlier on. I mean, there had been talk, I think, back in as early as March that Hillary was going to look at an all-woman ticket for November. And one of the reasons to do that was to upstage the GOP nominee should the GOP nominee pick a female vice presidential running mate, which I think would be a really good idea for Donald Trump to do for that very reason. And I think Cynthia McKinney could be encouraged to come back out of retirement to public life here, and that would help Donald Trump with the woman vote and the black vote.
The problem is I don't think he's going to take her. I don't even know if she'd want to run with Trump because she's been in a couple of shows. I heard her saying, well, once on Alex Jones, she didn't go too bad on Trump, but on Richie Allen, she really attacked him. So I don't know if that's a match that could be made. It would be nice.
Politics makes for strange bedfellows, and we've already seen in this election cycle where, people who were at each other's throats only a few months ago are now buddy and shaking hands because they're serving their mutual interests. So we'll see what happens. The only good news coming out of the Trump campaign, of course, is the revelation that Sheldon Adelson offered him a huge amount of money to make Newt Gingrich the vice president, and Trump turned him down, which was a smart thing to do. With an insider as VP, it guarantees Trump would be shot out of the Oval Office before the first year was out. Second, it confirmed Trump's promise that he cannot and will not be bought, and he just demonstrated that was going to happen. So
you see the way are attacking him too. It goes to show you that's what's really behind people like Bill Kristol and what's that guy Hewitt and all that. They want a neocon. They want a warmonger. They want somebody with the what do you call it? New American Project for New American.
Basically, Trump is a threat to the U.S. agenda for World War III. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you very much for the phone call, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and getting on back to the news. For some reason, yesterday we were talking about how much money Target has lost over this transgender restroom nonsense. Okay, this idea that Target will allow men to use the women's lady room if they're really women trapped in a man's body has cost them. People don't want to go there. People don't want to shop someplace where they can't go to the bathroom occasionally, and they don't want to go to a bathroom where there might be somebody who ought not to be there in their point of view. And apparently Target has taken a $10 billion hit, 20% of the company's value. And despite that, Target's CEO, Brian Cornell, is saying, we're not going to change course. I'm right. I don't care how much money I lose for our investors. This is the right thing to do. By the way, I used to be a man trapped in a woman's body, but then I was born. More debris has been found from the missing Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. I feel sorry for Malaysian Airlines. They've had all these problems. Shoot down over Ukraine and the missing Flight 370, which may have been yet another in a long series of innocent victims of accidents during military exercises. But they found more of the debris on a beach over in Madagascar. And, of course, with ocean currents being what they are, it doesn't mean that the plane itself crashed near Madagascar. Stuff floats. It goes all over the ocean. We've all heard stories about messages in bottles, and they really have happened. Now, we were talking yesterday about this unfortunate incident where this Henry County Police Department officer went to the wrong house on a 911 call and shot the homeowner. And the homeowner has unfortunately now died. And basically they're saying that the police officer got the wrong address somewhere along the 911 call to the police dispatcher. There was a mistake made. The officer went to the wrong house. Why it got out of control from there when there was no crime and no criminal it begs imagination. Now, over in Greenwood Village, and this is being reported in Tech Dirt, there was a guy named Leo Leck, and the police utterly destroyed his home. Now, Leo was not at home at the time. What happened is there was a suspect in a shoplifting, stolen a belt and 2 shirts, fled the police, hid out in the house, and it turned into a standoff. The police are claiming he fired at them. There's no evidence to support it, but they basically demolished the place. It looked like the aftermath of Fallujah. And so the homeowner is suing the police, and again, I think the police ought to be held personally, financially liable in these cases. They are totally, totally out of control. Now, Barack Obama is back on the human-caused global warming campaign, and we know once that November election is over, he's going to be hitting us all with a carbon tax because the U.S. government is dead broke, hopelessly in debt. And again, go back to that Saul Alinsky list of how you turn a country into a socialist country. And basically, in a nutshell, the government grabs everything and then gives it back to you if you're obedient. And they want to grab what's left of the money under this thinly veiled fraud that we are somehow responsible for climate change on this planet. And we're not. The dominating force for climate change on Earth is the changing output of the sun, which appears to be going into a new Maunder minimum and bringing with it a little ice age, and the slowly changing shape of the Earth's orbit, which is what gives us ice ages interspaced with the interglacials. And we're in an interglacial right now. And eventually we'll be back in a new ice age. It's not coming real soon, so I wouldn't worry about it just yet, but it will happen. But apparently Obama is out there screaming that Manhattan will be underwater if we don't act now on climate change. And what he means by act is give him more of your money. We have to have more of your money. We have to give it to Israel. We have to prop up Wall Street. We have to prop up Puerto Rico. We have to prop up the EU. Message to the White House, we don't have any more. You got it all. We have just enough to feed ourselves day to day to day to day. Now, if you want 300 million Americans to starve slowly to death in this country, then yeah, we can probably cough up a few more bucks. It's absolutely absurd here. Now, there's an interesting article over in Russia today. The scientist who blew the whistle on the lead problem in Flint, Michigan's tap water, Virginia Tech University Professor Mark Edwards, was out there saying this is, in fact, an epidemic problem all across the United States of America. And the laws that are supposed to protect the drinking water supply for the American people are being broken routinely. We already know water departments in 33 cities across 17 states were caught faking their testing data to conceal dangerous levels of chemicals in their water supplies. Now, yesterday's interview with the lady who designed the Solite and Helix and these little flat-pack lights generated a lot of interest. We got a lot of phone calls. I got a ton of email. And they're telling me they actually got a surge of orders for this light and a lot of interest here. And I got some emails about some questions, and specifically Sally up in Alaska who had some questions. So I went and I asked what's going on here. And apparently the expected lifespan of these lighting units is 3 to 5 years, depending upon how hard they're used. And basically saying that you can store it in the dark, but best to have a full charge on the battery. Remember, we had that caller call in saying if you store them in the dark, it's bad for the battery, and yes, it is. But if you fully charge it and then pack it away, it's good for 2 years in the darkness. And so that's kind of the information that comes out of that. So it's a nice little unit. They're going to send me one to play with. And again, my friend who's on the way to Nepal, we're going to try and get some more lights for her as well, because these people need the lights. Kerosene lanterns are very romantic. When I was a kid, I went through a phase where I had candles in my apartment, you know, sort of a latter-day hippie. I sort of missed the 1960s because I can still remember them. But it is dangerous to have open flames in your home. Carbon dioxide, which makes Al Gore giggle, and carbon monoxide, which if it accumulates, can be very, very toxic. So these are an ideal solution. Whether you're just camping and you want a portable light source, or you're a survivalist or a prepper, or just to have around in case the regular electricity goes down. It's a really, really good idea. Now, here's a wonderful, wonderful story coming out of Natural Blaze. Apparently, there was a study published in The Lancet, no less. The Lancet is considered one of the top, most respected medical journals on earth, if not the most respected. And this report is basically medical researchers analyzed 34 pharmaceutical trials involving 5,260 participants ranging in average age from 9 to 18 years, comparing prescription antidepressants with placebos. In other words, sugar pills. And they found out there was actually, in these reports, these studies that were done by the pharmaceutical companies to convince you that these antidepressants were going to make you less depressed, there was no difference. The people who took the placebos said they were feeling better as much as the people on the antidepressants. It's called the placebo effect. So what we have here is the Lancet admitting the prescription antidepressants don't actually deal with depression, and we know that these prescription antidepressants in some individuals can trigger off erratic behavior, suicidal behavior, mass violence. Virtually all of these mass shooters, the gun grabbers are always wagging at us, are either on or withdrawing from these medications. And it's when you're withdrawing, you are most at risk to have a full-on brain meltdown. It's not nice to fool with Mother Nature. They're tinkering with brain chemistry, and they don't really know what they're doing. But it's all about selling product. We've got to move more product. Now, a couple of websites I went around to today, there was a pop-up. I don't know who's doing it, but it basically opened up a browser window and said, urgent Firefox update. Obviously, the code was detecting that I'm on the Firefox browser. And I posted it to WhatReallyHappened.com. I disabled the link so people couldn't click on it by accident. But I wanted to put it out there because I've seen several of these in recent days, these pop-up ads saying, urgent, you must update your Firefox or your Chrome or your Internet Explorer or Opera or Windows or whatever. When you click on that button, these ads are planting malware on your system. You should never accept any kind of an upgrade or a patch from anyone but the original provider of the product. And what you can do on browsers is you mouse over the button and you look in Firefox, it's down at the bottom. It'll tell you the URL the button actually goes to. And if it's not going to, for example, Mozilla, in the case of the Firefox browser, then you know it's malware. And right now, as far as we can tell, the malware artists, well, they're not artists, the malware creators, the cyber criminals, have basically declared open war on the American people. And as usual, the mighty NSA can't or won't do a thing about it, proving again, along with the Tourism Suppression Agency, that U.S. government programs are costly, inconvenient, unconstitutional, and totally useless. Remember, earlier in the week we were talking about over in Russia. They found 50 hackers and threw them in prison. And what do we have here in the United States? If you get infected with ransomware, the FBI's official recommendation, better pay the ransom. We can't do diddly about that. We're too busy setting up patsies to be arrested as terrorists for the headlines. Now, one of the big talking points about using the cloud is the enhanced security that it will provide you. Well, there have been quite a few incidents where the clouds will lose all the data or are simply not available when you need to be. And I don't know about you. I don't like, having to have this umbilical cord between myself and the nearest Wi-Fi tower to be using my own data. I want it with me so that I can use it in the event of the fall of civilization. I want all my pictures of my beloved wife where I can still look at them. But there's an interesting little story. This came on out of Ars Technica over in Great Britain, saying that in point of fact, corporate shared folders in the cloud have as much, if not malware, than what's floating around through various Internet accounts. In fact, the cloud has become a fertile ground for malware. It's amazing here. Sir Tim Berners-Lee is out there saying the Internet has become the world's largest surveillance network. Certainly that was true with Windows 10. Emphasizing that situation, apparently 41 Secret Service employees have been punished, mildly, for illegally accessing Congressman's private data in the hopes of discrediting him. Now, I'm wondering just who it was who wanted this congressman brought down and used the Secret Service to do it. But they got caught. Story coming out of the Register, also in Great Britain. PC market sinking even faster than originally thought, and the primary reason is people don't want Windows 10. They're not going to buy a new computer with Windows 10. They're going to keep their old machines running, or they're going to go out on eBay and they're going to hunt down used computers that are still running Windows 7 or XP. That's how much people are hating Windows 10, with good reason. It's got serious, serious problems. It's an invasion of your privacy. And the arrogance of Microsoft saying, you will accept a new operating system, you Schweinhund, and you will pay for upgrades to all your software, and you will rent software month to month from now on. People are turned off by that. More and more people are going Linux because of that. Now, amazingly enough, and I was a little surprised to hear this, even Steve Jobs did not let his kids use iPads all the time. And say, occasionally, yes. But basically, what he was observing was overuse of these digital devices led to a lack of creativity, a lack of curiosity and passion. I'm not sure the curiosity is accurate. Most people with that much information at their hands, they tend to be curious, or at least I do. I love going out and satisfying my curiosity. A lack of patience, yeah, that's true. When you're living in an environment of instant gratification for whatever you want, you can lose the ability to wait patiently for things that may take a week or two. Live here in Hawaii, where everything has to be ordered online from the mainland, you'll regain your sense of patience. Lack of exercise, we know that's a problem. Claire and I were just having a talk the other day. We need to get out and walk and swim more. Apparently, decreased testing scores. They're not learning how to think, as opposed to just wandering and looking. They're not being encouraged to evaluate and analyze. And, of course, too much reliance on the Internet leads to a lack of human connection, and that is also true. Now, I think technology is wonderful, but there can be too much of it. And I think we sort of need to pull back. We don't need computers in everything that we own. There are some things computers are going to help. I love my Nerd Watch that Claire bought me. I don't need a computer in my coffee maker. I don't need TV cameras in my refrigerator. I mean, that's just getting a little bit overboard. Good news for people of Massachusetts. The Massachusetts Senate just passed a 10-year moratorium on fracking. They're very concerned about the adverse environmental effects of fracking, which the fracking industry continues to deny. At this point, though, the fracking industry can't really fight back because of that misguided, ill-thought-out oil price war against Russia. America's fracking industry is now deep in the red. They don't have a lot of resources to keep on putting out the propaganda. And again, I keep thinking back to that wonderful movie, Promised Land. I think it was Matt Damon was on that one. Just really laid it out. And I admire Matt because he's willing to take risks with his career to make comments about our society. And I've never met him. I would love to. Love to have him on the show. So we're coming up here on a commercial break, leading to the top of the hour. And the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us after that. So stay tuned. Actually, when we come back, we're going to be taking a phone call. But I can't start it right now. So we'll be back in a few minutes, and we're going to take this phone call. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And they're still going on about Muhammad Ali's funeral. Bill Clinton's out there saying, yeah, he was a great guy. We really like him. And anyway. All right, let's take a phone call. Kathy in Georgia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Michael. Today I went online to do some banking, and I got this message above where I have to put in all my passwords and stuff, and it says, effective Monday, July 11th, 2016. Clients attempting to gain access to our website using Internet Explorer version 7 or 8 will not be able to do so. Please upgrade to a current version to ensure continued access. The following website will assist you in upgrading your browser. And, of course, the download is there. Well, I got on the phone to customer care, and I gave it to them good. And I told them, obviously, I am switching banks. I'm going to a local credit union, which I've already contacted to make sure they're not going to do the same monkey business. But I can't believe I'm going to be the only one that's going to be really upset about this.
Well,
I couldn't believe it.
I can understand you're upset now. Are they talking about you're going to have to use the Internet Explorer that comes with Windows 10?
Yes.
That is a little bit of an overreach for any kind of a bank to do. In theory, a well-written website, it's not going to matter what browser is being used with it. And I understand that the standards are continuously changing. And for example, Skype on XP it misses one of its panels because it's supposed to be using Internet Explorer, blah, 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 blah. But the idea that your bank is going to require you to upgrade to Windows 10, I'm with you. If my bank ever said that to me, I would change banks.
Yeah. Well, because it says Internet Explorer version 7 or 8 will not be able to do so.
So it's Internet Explorer 9, and that requires Windows 10. That really seems absurd. I can't even think of a reason why. Are you doing monetary transfers, or are you just checking your balance?
Oh, I don't do. I just went on to check to see. I forgot to write a couple of things down, and I go to see if the transaction's posted and that kind of stuff. I'm not.
There's no reason that website should not continue to work with Internet Explorer 7 or 8. I mean, that's absolutely, utterly ridiculous.
Well, that's what they're telling me, so I said, that's okay. I'll go somewhere else. You know what I mean? But I just wanted to call and tell you, since you were talking about Internet, Explorer 10 and stuff. So anyway, That's all I wanted to tell you today, Michael. I really love your show. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much here. I mean, that strikes me as really bad. All right, we're going to let you go here. We're coming up at the top of the hour. Quick story. 2 nuns from the city of Merced, California, are defying the ban on cultivation of marijuana, growing marijuana for medical purpose. Good for those nuns. Marijuana's got medicinal benefit. It is nowhere near as harmful as the legal drugs of nicotine and alcohol. The problem is you can grow it in your own backyard, and that means some corporation can't make money off of it, and that's why it must be illegal. Apparently another major fireball came down in the sky above St. Louis. I mean, we're really starting to see more and more of these really large meteor falls happening now. And we talked about that earlier. We're going to take a break for station identification. Back with the lovely Lady Claire after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And for those of you watching on BAM User TV, this gorgeous creature sitting behind me is the lovely Lady Claire, who will share the microphone with me on our Friday third hour. So, Lady Claire, what's the first thing you want to talk about?
Kind of a very interesting irony in Hillary Clinton's background. Apparently, rebel forces in southern Sudan began using child soldiers long before seceding from Sudan in 2011. The U.S., on the other hand, passed a law in 2008 that banned providing military assistance to nations that used child soldiers. The law was called the Child Soldiers Prevention Act. But after South Sudan's independence, the White House issued annual waivers that kept aid flowing to the world's newest nation despite of its use of child soldiers. And President Obama stated in 2012 that the waiver was in the national interest of the United States. Hillary Clinton, who was Secretary of State when those first waivers were issued, was never asked to comment, and she's never been asked to explain about why she felt these waivers for child soldiers were important.
Now, when we're talking child soldiers, we're talking about 10, 11, 12-year-old kids.
Yes, exactly.
Kids with guns. And, it is definitely, I think, well, first of all, war is immoral to begin with. Mm-hmm. But any nation that is using child soldiers, they're obviously down to their last resort. Or, and we've seen this happen before, especially in a lot of the third world nations, where a group will go into a village and grab the children and force them to be soldiers.
Right.
It's sort of an underage draft, if you will, at the point of a gun.
Yep. But I find it rather ironic that as someone who alleges to be for children, that she found it perfectly acceptable for South Sudan to be using child soldiers.
Well, Hillary's always out there talking about she's a champion for women's rights, but then you look at all these nations in the Middle East that do abuse women, and she doesn't say anything about them. But they're all very generous donators to the Clinton Foundation.
Yes.
And again, Hillary's sense of morality is extraordinarily adaptable, I think would be the best, most polite way to put it.
That's a good word. It's
adapt. She's flexible. Yeah. She's willing to compromise in exchange for a donation to the Clinton Foundation.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things, most interestingly, if she is a champion of women, the countries in the Middle East which have donated to the Clinton Foundation all allow one practice to continue in their countries: female genital mutilation. Now, how can, in the name of heaven, someone be pro-women and take money from countries that still allow this to happen? Mike, I don't know. My mind boggles at it.
It does, especially because we can't go into the gory details here on the radio.
And they are gory.
They are gory.
Yeah.
It does prevent the women from really enjoying sex, and I'm sure somebody has got some explanation from some imaginary playmate in the sky why this is, the will of the gods or something. But it is a little serious. And yes, it's their country. And their religion, but at the same time, there's no reason for our country to be sending these nations doing things that we find offensive. We're not justified invading them over what they're doing, but we are justified in not signing any more checks and sending them any more weapons.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. You talked a little bit earlier about the U.S. Thinking about doing more strikes in Afghanistan.
Oh, they pretty much announced it.
Yeah.
They're on their way.
Yeah. And I have to ask you, Mike, why in heaven are we still there? You know, and I'd like to start...
Opium.
Well,
there's oil and opium in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
We're going to be in Afghanistan until all the oil is sucked out and all those poppies have gone away.
Well, just a couple of numbers. As of the first part of 2015, the number of U.S. states troops who have died in the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq has passed the 6,800 mark.
And I'm going to bet that's a very low estimate. I mean, Americans did not find out how many of our kids had been killed in Vietnam until after it was all over. And then the government came on out and said, yeah, we actually lost a few more than we were telling you.
Yeah.
Here's the new number. And, we lied to you in the national interest, meaning keeping the war going.
Yeah, and I have to ask how much this war has cost us. Well, as of January of 2015, Time.com said that the figure at that point was $685.6 billion.
More than $500 billion.
Yeah, and the question I think our readers and listeners need to ask is, are we any more safe because of this war? I don't think so.
No, we're not. I mean, this war is for the benefit of oil companies and American drug lords and heroin sellers and so forth. And the reality is that, I mean, for $500 billion, they could wipe out the debt of most of the American people with that kind of money.
Pull a John Oliver.
Pull a John Oliver on that.
Yes.
All right, we got to take a second here to issue a sort of a shout-out to all of our on-air affiliates who are rejoining us at this point in the hour. And we are sharing this third hour Friday with my lovely wife, the Lady Claire, and her comments on what's going on in the world. So what is next on your very copious list of talking points?
Yes, they are copious today.
I think you extincted an entire species of tree with that.
Yeah. There is one piece of hopeful news, however, that I wanted to share with our readers and listeners.
We need hopeful news.
There are preparations underway for a summit regarding the Nagorno-Karabakh situation in St. Petersburg soon. And the more we can get the Azerbaijanis and the Armenians talking and not shooting at each other, this is a good thing. I think that Russia is perceived as an honest broker by both countries, and hopefully the dialogue will move the process along where there can be a meaningful peace deal created and permanently de-escalate tensions in the region.
Well, that would be really nice, but, the big money is made on increasing chaos and increasing tension. Wars are the bankers' biggest harvest, and unfortunately when you live in a world dominated by private central banks, there's this cruel three-step process that happens when you are enslaved to a private central bank. When that first pretty printed piece of paper goes into circulation, more money is owed to that private central bank than actually exists. You can never pay it off. And the debt grows and grows and grows. And the first thing that happens is the people go into debt until they reach a point where they refuse to borrow anymore because they're struggling with the payments to the bank. Well, at that point, the Keynesians step on in and say government must borrow more on behalf of the people and without their permission in order to keep the system going. And so then you reach a point where the people won't borrow anymore, the government can't borrow anymore, which is where we are right now in the United States, and that's when they start looking at starting a war of conquest to grab other nations' wealth to keep their private central bankers happy. And that's why when you have a private central bank, it is inevitable that you're going to have major war after major war after major war, and you need to remember, prior to the creation of the Federal Reserve, there was no such thing as a world war, and now we're into big mistake number 3.
Yes, I'd also like to talk about food safety in this country and the reality that it's taking far too long for the FDA to recall tainted foods. Now, anyone who has ever suffered with a case of food poisoning, you understand what I mean. The Food and Drug Administration has just been sclerotic in terms of getting recall notices to the American people in a timely manner so they don't or their kids don't eat something that's going to hurt them. There was a general review by the Department of Health and Human Services Office of Inspector General, and they reviewed 30 recalls that occurred between 2012 and 2015, including 2 companies where the companies did not recall the affected items until 165 days and 81 days after the FDA became aware of the problem. And this is insane. This absolutely doesn't work, Michael.
It is absolutely insane. I mean, we have seen this all across the government, where all of these agencies that get our tax money and are supposed to be looking out for our welfare don't. The Securities and Exchange Commission sat on its butt watching online porn for 12 years while Bernie made off with the loot, cheated his investors out of $60 billion. The Minerals Management Service just ignored the fact that the manual blowout preventer on the Deepwater Horizon drilling platform was 4 years overdue for its mandatory maintenance. Same thing, mining disasters, we always find out the agency that was supposed to be watching it was acting more and more like it's an industry support group. We see that with the USDA is out there championing GMO foods. Our government is wholly on the side of corporate interests, and that, of course, is the classic definition of fascism.
Right, right. I think the FDA needs to be fired from the top down. And
I think the government needs to be fired from the top down.
Yes, you're fired.
Yes,
you're
the
apprentice.
Fired. You're fired. Yeah.
But we do need better mechanisms in place to make sure that this isn't going to happen to the American people. They seem to be expendable at so many levels, it's not even funny.
It is. And I think one of the reasons why people want Donald Trump as president is because he's going to look at what's going on in the government and realize this is not the way it's supposed to be. Everybody who's an establishment politician, they've gotten used to it. They've sort of become numb to the whole system is so corrupt. Everyone inside the system has just sort of said, well, this is just the way it is. And, you know, we don't want to make waves. We don't want to rock the boat. And Donald Trump, I think, is going to come on in. He's going to take a really big rock and punch a big hole in the bottom of that boat. And it's well overdue. I mean, Washington, D.C. is in dire need of an enema, to put it politely.
Yes. I'd also like to go over to the concept of when is something said racist. And it's an article I posted earlier today. Apparently, and this is on video, there is no wiggle room for Secretary Clinton. In 2006, she did a speech where she said that Mexican immigration needed to be contained and there needed to be better barriers put up to protect the United States. But Donald Trump says something like that in 2016, and he's the racist?
Well, you know, back in 2006, Hillary didn't need those illegal immigrants to vote for her because back in 2006, they were still enforcing the law, saying that only U.S. citizens can vote in the elections. Well, you know, today it's different. Illegals can vote in most of the states of the Union. You know, they're not allowed to ask for ID. You've got to show ID to buy alcohol and tobacco and certainly to buy a gun. But to vote in the elections, heck no. Anybody come on in. We got ballots in all the various languages.
And speaking of which, the motor voter law that was passed in California and signed by Jerry Brown
clearly has been abused.
What a travesty. And but the other thing I think that Democrats may not be thinking about, and I know many people who are of a Hispanic origin, many of them are very conservative. They are very church-based. They're very faith-based. And they tend to look for candidates who will protect their abilities to go out and work very hard and earn a living. I think those people are going to be more apt to be looking at Trump as the real deal this election.
I agree with you, but you're talking about the immigrants who come into the country legally. They've played by the rules. They've filled out the forms. They're here. They're working to build a better life. But we have this tsunami of refugees and illegals coming into the nation being told that the government is going to give them all kinds of free stuff. And they're being told this primarily by the Democrats. So, of course, that's what they're going to do. We're in the bread and circuses phase of the decline and fall of the American empire.
You know, even Roseanne Barr came out the other day, and she said that illegal immigrants to this country are treated a lot better than our regular citizens who were born here.
Better than our veterans?
Yeah.
You know, right now the U.S. government is spending $20,000 for every individual refugee being settled in this country. Our own kids are not being treated as well.
Yes, I know. And she said that's why she felt that she needed to go with Trump, and which I thought was kind of amazing. But good on you, Roseanne, for having made that decision. And the other thing that we also need to look at, illegal labor brings down the cost of doing business for major corporations. And, of course, Hillary is owned by the major corporations. It's just cheaper, and it also suppresses the wages of Americans who were born here.
Well, there is that issue, but again, they're not thinking the matter all the way through. First of all, we have somewhere close to 100 million Americans who've been out of work for months and years.
Yeah.
If we don't have jobs for them, we do not have jobs for the illegal immigrants and the refugees coming on in.
Yeah.
Second, if you're not paying ordinary people decent wages and salaries, they are not going to go down to that shopping mall and buy the products that are being in there. You can't have all the money concentrated at the very, very top and expect the economy to work. It just simply will not. The economy is a complex system. There has to be ample currency flowing at all levels of society and into all necessary sectors of investment to keep it working properly. And when it's all sucked up to that 1%, when the wealth inequality gets to be this out of whack, the economy is going to lock up. And flooding the nation with illegal immigrants and refugees is not going to fix it. It's going to make the crash worse.
Absolutely. And here in the islands, intergenerational living is something that is very common with families, where you will have 2 or 3 generations living together in a home that somewhere along the line mom and dad or grandma or grandpa did purchase. But on the mainland, that's becoming a very strange norm for a lot of people, especially for kids who have had to move back with mom and dad.
Kids who've gone to college, they've incurred $30,000, $50,000 in student loan debt. The high-paying jobs they were told would be waiting for them on graduation are not there.
Nope.
And they have to move back in with their parents, and every penny that they're working to earn goes to the banks who issued those student loans.
Yep. And I have to wonder, at least in terms of these promises of jobs, if some of these students are going to start filing class action lawsuits against these schools. Well, you told me this number of jobs would be here, and it's absolutely not.
No, they are not. I mean, and remember, U.S. tax policy signed into law under George W. Bush incentivized American corporations to offshore high-paying jobs to other countries. And we all know it's part of this whole New World Order idea that we're going to crush all of the world's economies down to the same low, dirt poor level so that they can drop the borders. But it certainly is an insult to the people of the United States of America, whose labor and innovation and creativity built this nation. And now the government is saying, well, we're going to take it away from you because we think the planet should be under one ruler, one holy throne of planetary empire, and we're all going along with this because we dream of sitting on the throne of planet Earth.
And there's a lot of anger into which Trump, I am sure, is able to tap right now from people who have been displaced.
He's got me.
Through this ongoing, continuing outshoring, offsourcing of jobs. And a lot of people, if they're lucky enough to get them, they're doing like 3 minimum wage jobs to barely hold things together. And then they're going into debt, which of course the banks love, but they're going into a debt which, because of their income level, they can't begin to repay.
We're definitely between the rock and the hard place. And by the way, another plug for Michael Moore's new documentary, Who to Invade Next. And again, it didn't get a regular distribution deal. It wasn't in the theaters, but it's had private screenings all over the country. It's on pay-per-view cable right now. Your homework assignment for this weekend, if you have not seen it, is to watch it. There will be a pop quiz at the start of class on Monday. Real quick here, I just got an email from somebody responding to the phone call about the bank demanding Windows 10, saying basically Internet Explorer 11, which is 2 beyond the version demanded by the bank, will work on Windows 7. So apparently this demand to upgrade to Internet Explorer 9 does not mandate an upgrade to Windows 10. But still in all, I question any bank that tells you you have got to upgrade anything about your computers. If it's a well-written website, it shouldn't matter. And we're seeing more and more developers of website get lazy and say, well, I'm just going to write their website for this browser of this version, and if you love me and have to do business with me, you will change your system to work with us. Whatever happened to the customer is always right and customer service?
And, Mike, isn't this a kind of restraint of trade? If someone is using another kind of browser, or engineered by another company, isn't that a form of restraint of trade?
I think it could be construed as such. I mean, we don't actually pay for the browsers, but it could be seen as an attack, to push Internet Explorer ahead of certain other browsers. And there are browser wars going on because the browsers do make their money collecting your marketing data. We have to take a break for commercials. We've got a caller waiting on the line. We're going to take that call as soon as we're back from these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and we're going to take a phone call from Steve in Colorado. Steve, thank you for waiting so patiently. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, hi there. Hello, Mike and Claire. I had heard you, Mike, on Coast to Coast. I was just going across Republic Broadcasting, and I didn't realize that you had a program on their channel, so this is the first time I've heard you on the air this way instead on Coast to Coast. But anyway, the first thing right quickly is you mentioned about where's the customer service. Well, the corporations, of course, are getting so big anymore, and the competition, because they're, everybody's buying out all the smaller companies and everything, the competition is going away, so they don't have to worry about customer service anymore.
Well, that's part of it. The other is they're basically trying to get us all used to the idea that they're going to take our money and we do all the work now. And I can't think of any.
Sure.
Look at all these online insurance, get a loan, whatever, and they're offering and say, well, it'll be lower money, you'll get the best possible deal. What they're doing is they're firing their own clerical staff and letting us do the work involved in setting up the insurance or the bank loan or the mortgage or whatever it is, and then we pay them, for the mortgage. And especially when you're dealing with a mortgage where they're just creating the money out of thin air to loan you.
Yep.
No kidding.
It's a win-win deal. They just type a number into the computer. You're doing all the legwork. You're filling out all the paperwork. You're doing the rest of it, and then of course you are now in a debt slavery to the bank until you die. That's actually what the word mortgage means. It comes from mort, meaning death, and gage, which is a pledge or a promise. And a mortgage is a debt slavery pledge for your entire lifespan. Now, they've shortened it to 30 years. Actually, they're starting to get longer again. Mortgages are getting longer. But that's basically what it is. You are an indentured servant to the bank for your entire life for their permission to live in a house that was bought with money created out of thin air.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It is created out of thin air.
This is why advanced alien civilizations aren't visiting the Earth. They're looking down here and saying, these people are all crazy.
Well, no intelligent life here.
No intelligent life here. We're not going to bother. We're out of here. We're going to go look at the bacteria on Mars.
You know what those are? These, quote, aliens are just demons in manifest. That's what they won't tell you. That's the dirty little secret that they won't tell you. And the Bible tells us
we're going to get nasty letters from the extraterrestrials now. Anyway, Steve, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go and get on back here to the lovely lady Claire. And what is your next story?
Well, as though we have not provoked Russia enough, the U.S. has
let's provoke them some more.
The U.S. has sent another destroyer into the Black Sea.
Oh, good. Another ship for the Russian electronic warfare aircraft to practice on.
Yes, to
humiliate
yes.
and shame.
Yes. And I've had to kind of scratch my head and think back. I turned 67 not too long ago. And, Mike, I have to share with you that I have really never seen a government in an election year try to create so much harm and hatred that it could provoke a military confrontation with either Russia or China.
Well, I think the reason for that is very obvious. The polls are already showing that Donald Trump is way, way ahead of Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton has all this baggage with her, and so far the only thing we've got on Donald Trump is that he wounded the feelings of the illegal immigrants. Ooh, big deal. And so I think the plan is going to be the people who want the New World War are going to get it started before Donald Trump can take the oath of office and stick him with it, the way Herbert Hoover was stuck with the Depression of the 1930s.
Right. And not only that, but if Clinton actually steals/wins the election, she very much wants to give the world the impression of being a war president. And the blood, other people's blood, of course, is sort of an aphrodisiac of power for her. So she will very much welcome this. And it wouldn't surprise me if the Obama administration, if they really think that Trump is going to clinch the whole thing, would put the economy in an absolute tailspin right at the same time.
Well, you know, that's rather problematic because wars require a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, weapons, munitions, all kind of supplies that are spent like pouring water out of a bucket.
Yep.
And you have to have a civil population able to sustain that kind of spending. And again, yes, the bankers are just going to create the instant money to give to the war hawks. But I think what they're trying to do is start World War III because they can't stop the economic crash and they want the war to blame it on. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to our show here. And lovely Lady Claire, what have you got you want to talk about now?
This I found fascinating, at being someone who contributes to a blog. The New York Times now says fair use of 300 words will run you about $1,800. And about $6 a word, and there were some researchers who were trying to obtain formal permission to use 3 quotations from the New York Times articles in a book, ultimately cost 2 professors $1,800. These people are outraged, and they have taken to Kickstarter to recoup the charges, but to protest the Times and publishers' lack of respect for fair use.
Now, for those who are not sure what we're talking about, there is a provision in the copyright law, and it's called the Fair Use Doctrine, where you may excerpt content from copyrighted articles for the purposes of education and analysis.
Yeah.
If you're going to tear apart somebody's argument in favor of war with Saddam Hussein, you have to be able to quote them saying what their reasons are. And the fair use doctrine has been part of the intellectual property landscape for a very, very long time. And for the New York Times to take this position, this is the beginning of an attack on the independent media, saying that we can't quote them at all, even if our purpose is to inform the public that what is being published by the New York Times and the Washington Post and the rest of them are, in fact, bald-faced lies.
Yep.
And, you know, we can describe what the New York Times says, and then the Times comes back and say, well, no, that's not actually what we said. Okay, can we quote you? No, you can't, unless you want to pay $6 a word.
Yeah.
So this is a way of trying to insulate themselves from independent analysis of what it is they're trying to tell the public.
Yeah. And, you know, if I had time for such a project, I would take a look at New York Times, either online or in print. I would get a list of all their advertisers, and I would say, we're not reading this paper or this website anymore because of how they treat the concept of fair use, which means your ads are futile.
Well, I'm certainly not going to link to the New York Times from WhatReallyHappened.com anymore either.
Neither am I. But I think people have to be vocal, they have to be educated, and they have to understand how much this is the proverbial camel's nose under the tent.
It is.
Yeah,
And again, when you couple it with this measure in Congress to literally create a U.S. Ministry of Propaganda, we're seeing the coming war on the First Amendment. I mean, they're attacking the Second Amendment. They've basically destroyed the Fourth Amendment. And what they want is to go to a world like they had back in the 1950s and 1960s, where the government will tell the media what to tell you. The media will tell you that. You'll have no alternative but to believe them. And anybody with a dissenting or contrasting point of view or simply pointing out the inconsistencies, like how the gun found with Vince Foster had been wiped clean, and we're pretty sure he didn't do it after it was used,
No.
will be kept silent so that you believe as the government tells you to believe. Okay, we're going to take a phone call here. Fred in Utah. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I wanted to talk about food safety in major supermarkets.
Please do.
Okay. But before I say that, let me make a quick comment about this fair use.
Yes.
One of the factors in fair use is if you don't make profit off of it, and is like a teacher, like my granddaughter in the thing, I called her. I said, go find Food Inc. It's so good for your health. She said, I've seen it. I said, where? And she said, our teacher brought to the school and showed it to us. So this fair use, teacher is not making any financial profit.
Well, in this case, we're dealing with authors who were writing a textbook which presumably would be for sale, so there was profit involved. But even if you're writing some kind of a textbook for profit, fair use says you have a right to excerpt and quote from other material as part of your process of analysis and education.
Okay, now let me mention this information that I have about 10 years ago, NBC, as you know, is owned by General Electric, whose business of war and that kind of thing, and making, I don't know, all kind of technical thing for warfare.
Yes.
Yes.
So they had a program, I think it was Dateline.
Yes.
And they have done 1 year investigation about safety of food safety in all of major supermarkets across United States.
Yes.
And then the result was that one in Southern California, which is part of Safe Bay, which is Northern California, was the number one in more, they called it critical safety violations.
Mm-hmm.
And number two was famous Kroger, that they have branches like in Southern California, Ralph's is called, and here it's called Smith
Right.
in Utah.
Yeah.
And then the third place was Albertson.
Yes.
With more critical safety violation in detail. The program was about 35 minutes in Dateline.
Okay.
So what I'm just saying to you, when Claire was mentioning about safety of food in supermarkets, I'm always careful that to wash my hands even after I buy meat to touch anything. So
well, now let's be fair here, because some of the corporate media reporting on food mishandling in supermarkets is politically motivated, and I'd like to remind everybody about this scandal. The ABC Primetime Live was on ABC, and they did a story about food mishandling at the Food Lion supermarkets. Now, the unions were trying to get into Food Lion. Food Lion didn't want them there, and so ABC sent some producers over to get jobs as Food Lion employees and secretly videotape things like food being dropped on the floor and then being returned to the shelf. And what it finally came out was it was ABC's producers who were doing all these things to generate the video for this report on Primetime Live. The purpose was to financially damage Food Lion to the point where they would have to accept unionization. Food Lion sued, and they won $5.5 million in damages.
Mm-hmm.
NBC, of course, had that GM truck story that they did about the exploding side fuel tanks, where they literally rigged the truck with explosives to make it look like it was dangerous, and that was a major lawsuit. I mean, the corporate media is used as weapons in wars by one group against the other. I mean, we'll sick the media on you. I mean, the definition of a corporate bad day is showing up to your place of employment and finding a 60 Minutes news crew waiting in the lobby. They're not there to make you look good.
No, definitely not.
And so there's a lot of that, and it's nothing new. The media is going to be out there. It's being used as a weapon. And, again, I want to remind you all about this quote from a guy named John Swinton. He had been chief of staff at the New York Sun, and he made this speech at the New York Press Club in 1880. And this guy was well respected. He was considered the dean of his profession. And I want to read you the quote that he made. Apparently he was on the edge of retiring, and he felt he could speak the truth. "There is no such thing at this date of the world's history as an independent press. You know it, and I know it. There is not one of you who dares to write your honest opinions, and if you did, you know beforehand that it would never appear in print. I am paid weekly for keeping my honest opinions out of the paper I'm connected with. Others of you are paid similar salaries for similar things, and any of you who would be so foolish as to write honest opinions would be out on the streets looking for another job. If I allowed my honest opinions to appear in one issue of my paper, before 24 hours my occupation would be gone. The business of the journalist is to destroy the truth, to lie outright, to pervert, to vilify, to fawn at the feet of Mammon, and to sell his country for his daily bread. You know it, and I know it. And what folly is this toasting an independent press? We are the tools and vassals of the rich men behind the scenes. We are the jumping jacks. They pull the strings and we dance. Our talents, our possibilities, and our lives are all the property of other men. We are intellectual prostitutes, or as I like to call them, prostitutes and correspondents."
The minute you mentioned about prostitutes, I'll call another time. Tell me about Congressman, God bless him, Trafficon.
Oh, yes.
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 Yeah. Okay, bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. And there have been voices that have tried to speak out about what's going on in the corporate media. Of course, Edward R. Murrow, I idolize him, and I probably don't know all the details about the true story there, but that speech he made about wires and lights in a box is just as valid to the world of the Internet today.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think he was a great American. And I've never read anything that caused me to believe that he wasn't. And, I would sort of like to hope that his spirit lives on with the independent press.
I would like it to, and
yeah.
I'm going to read you that. Okay, here we are. This is the quote, and I look at this all the time when I'm working here on the Internet. This instrument can teach, it can illuminate, yes, and even it can inspire, but it can do so only to the extent that humans are determined to use it to those ends. Otherwise, it's nothing but wires and lights in a box. And that was true for television. It's true for the Internet today. We're going to take a phone call. Steve in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, just to comment on what you've talked about in the past before. I think a lot of these food handling things, the E. coli outbreak stuff, that's corporate sabotage. I'm pretty sure the Chipotle is, and you mentioned 3 weeks prior that you thought when they came out against the GMO. That
they announced the GMO. Sure. Yeah, they announced a GMO-free menu, and then all of a sudden their restaurants all across the country are getting hit with these E. coli scandals.
Odd how that happened, right?
Yep. Who would have thunk it?
Yep.
Well, they're sending a message out to anybody else that comes out against GMO. They're going to do the same to them. So, yeah, it's corporate sabotage, no doubt about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you know corporate espionage is actually bigger business than national espionage? Most of the spies work for corporations, not for the government. All right, so what is next on your line?
Apparently, the Israeli army has dispatched more forces to its border with Lebanon. They sent an armed contingent to the western territories of Shibaa Farms to reinvigorate its forces' presence at the border, a source in the Lebanese army mentioned. There were 3 armored vehicles, reportedly accompanied by a convoy of Israeli bulldozers.
Well, here's what's going on here. We know that Netanyahu, when he was up in Moscow, was demanding that Putin allow Israel open access to the airspace, not only over Syria but over Lebanon. Mm-hmm. We know Israel still wants that Litani River. Mm-hmm. They have been lusting for it. They came within 20 miles of it during their last incursion into Lebanon, mm-hmm. and I imagine that the next time there's a really big newsworthy war someplace else, Israel's going to put another move onto Lebanon because they want that Litani River.
So they're waiting for a distraction.
They're waiting, or they will cause a distraction.
And they think the distraction is coming soon.
Yes.
Yeah. That's sort of what I thought as well. You can't mass people and equipment and keep the level of readiness there also with the financial costs to that without being ready to use it.
Something you should keep in mind as you look at this NATO drill all along the Russian border mm-hmm. and down there on that isthmus leading between Ukraine and Crimea.
Yeah. Also, there is another exercise which is going on right close to the South China Sea, and it's the Malabar exercise at Sasebo Port in Japan, very close to the disputed area of the South China Sea. They're going to have a lot of Indian, they're going to have a lot of Japanese and American troops there, allegedly to support maritime security in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, very interesting.
Boy, they're just all they're all just hot and bothered for a world war. And, if they want to go fight it themselves and they want to pay for it themselves, let them have their war. Mm-hmm. The problem is all of these people who want these wars, they want you to pay for it. They want your children to be killed and crippled in it.
Yep.
Their kids are too precious. We're going to keep our kids. That's what you are for, is you're just workers and soldiers, and that's all you're good for.
Yeah, it's with all of these exercises taken together, the United States, with the enabling of other nations, appears to be behaving toward China and Russia like a picador does to a bull in a bullfight.
Which we already know, because the underlying cause of this rush to a new world war is the U.S. paper Federal Reserve note versus the Russian ruble and the new gold-backed yuan in China. Right now, without the world being forced to go through the dollar for cross-border trade and banking, there's nothing left to hold up the U.S. economy.
Yeah.
Our manufacturing has been in decline. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. And so the agenda behind this new world war is to force the world back to the Bretton Woods Agreement, where everybody goes through the U.S. dollar, and the U.S. makes a little piece of the action off of that, just like the mafia. When they come on down and say, we need a piece of the action for protection. Yeah. You don't give us a piece of the action, something bad going to happen to you.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you and I discussed it the other night. It's sort of like looking in a dream at a slow motion train wreck that you are trying desperately to stop, and which is very challenging to try to stop.
And you really can't in the dream. And I actually went through that experience in real life, because when I was down in Australia, and I was down there for a while, they have the reproduction of the Bounty used on the Mel Gibson version of the Mutiny on the Bounty story, and they take tourists around the harbor. And any chance I got, I would go out on that thing, because I'm a tall ship junkie. Claire and I were actually married under sail, and we did Fiji by tall ship. So I'm definitely a rag setter by temperament and background. I remember one time standing on that. Fortunately, I did not have my hands on the helm for this one. But I'm standing on the dock, and this Bounty is coming on in, and I can tell it's coming too fast. And it came on in, and it hit the dock and tore off what's called the jumper strut, which is up by the stern, and it holds part of the sheets for trimming the sails on the rear. And it made a heck of a noise. And you could just see it was going to happen, and nobody could do a thing about it. And I'm looking at America right now, and we're just being flogged forward into these wars. And setting aside the fact that war is wrong to begin with, it represents a failure of politics and policy, is the fact that I don't see the United States able to win a conventional war against Russia and China, or even to prevail when it goes nuclear. And that's why I'm trying as hard to find another way. And Donald Trump is that other way. He's out there on record. He wants to go back to being friends with Russia and China, wants to do trade, wants peace through commerce. Why is peace through commerce such a threat to the U.S. establishment right now?
Because they don't know how to do anything, Mike.
That's right.
They generally never have.
No, these are politicians. Yeah. They don't know how to do anything except take money away from one group and give it to another group, and then bask in the glory and gratitude of that second group.
Yeah.
And again, when this nation was started, our leaders were people who had, if you put it politely, a day job. And this nation was never supposed to have a permanent ruling class, let alone hereditary, Bush after Bush, Clinton after Clinton. That was never the intention of the Founding Fathers. I have to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. Last segment of our program on this Kaahumanu Friday, going into the weekend. By the way, it's a holiday here in Hawaii today, King Kamehameha Day. And just stepping back and taking stock of what's going on. If we look at our nation today, what's going on? Absolutely fraudulent elections, toxic medications of dubious efficacy and usability, toxins in our food, toxins in our drinking water coming out of the faucet, massive surveillance, violations of our civil rights, and on and on and on. And we realize in many ways we're back in the same state of oppression that the American colonies were under King George III. We're being ordered what to buy, who to buy it from. We're being forced to conduct all commerce with banknotes borrowed at interest from a central bank. And we're really in the same situation, and I can understand why there are so many people out there saying that they're ready for a revolution. I'm still opposed to the idea, but at this point, I don't see any way to keep it from happening, and that is just my best assessment at this point. So we're coming up on a period of turmoil, and again, what I'd like to see happen is a repeat of what happened in the Soviet Union, where the central government just collapsed from its own debt and rot and corruption, and there were a couple of months, 3-4 months, where everybody had to really work just to take care of themselves, and then they formed the new Russian republics, and things are a lot better than they were under the former Soviet Union. And I foresee that as being the most likely outcome for what we're doing, what we're going through here in the United States. But we have to be prepared for that interval of time between the collapse of the federal government, on which we've all been forced to be dependent against our will, and the rise or the formation of a new government that is going to allow us more freedom, more independence, more sovereignty, more self-reliance.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Claire, you had some suggestions about how we're going to do that.
I do. I think it's really important for people to take a look at what their physical resources are in terms of storable food, potable water, medication for yourselves and your pets. And that is really going to be important. Also, if you have kids, make sure that you know what the release policy is of that school if you want to take them out of school at a time when normally you wouldn't, because you feel there is some kind of imminent situation happening. There also needs to be an ironclad plan for getting the family back together.
And that plan has to be able to work if all communications cut off, meaning there's a pre-agreed rendezvous point and rendezvous time. Again, you got to really think in terms of a world in which all of a sudden all this technology you're dependent on is shut off in order to maximize the confusion in the streets and hand the tactical advantage to the government forces who are going to be out there confiscating guns and confiscating gold and grabbing your children and sending them off to war.
And you really need to figure out what you can barter with. Barter is probably going to make it back in a big way.
I would imagine so. And again, this is where buying that so-called junk silver, the pre-1965 coins, because those are recognized, acknowledged units of value that can be used to power commerce when the Federal Reserve note collapses. There's the music. Time for us to get on out of here. We got things we got to be doing. And we'll be back Monday here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. So have a good weekend. Share what you know with everybody that you know. Thanks to everybody who's donating and contributing and keeping our equipment up and running. We really do appreciate it. And aloha, America.